Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I'm not sure I understand why you're here, but we will get to that. What I intend to do a little bit today is to cover some of the issues that face manufacturing. Manufacturing being probably the most underestimated and most forgotten of our core activities for value creation today. Everybody talks about other things, tending to forget that underneath this sits manufacturing. There is not a single advanced economy in the world today doing well that does not build that well-doing on manufacturing. Normally high value-added manufacturing, normally manufacturing with an export focus. And I will try to cover some of those issues with a few reflections. And do feel free after the session to ask questions. I do encourage that. Now let's see if we can get the technology to work here in some form or another. There we go. Manufacturing comes in many forms, and that's the first issue. It's such a broad area that it's almost meaningless to talk to. You know, we have manufacturing which is making chocolate, very nice, we like that. We'd have manufacturing covering, food, we have clothes, we have footwear, we have automotive manufacturing, we have specialized instrumentation manufacturing, we have the manufacturer using biotechnology processes of high-value chemical issues. Manufacturing is everything in this sense. As long as the output is something that can be put to use that you have added value to. And as long as you follow economies of scale, you are basically manufacturing. And like all these areas, we tend to get a little bit caught on the back hoof on the changings in the world. If you look up statistics, it will tell you that as countries develop, and we can see that down here from, let's see, hold it right way around this one. Is it there? There we go. From simple economies and advance themselves and up to whatever present is the modern terminology, innovation-driven economy, the manufacturing statistics looks like that. The problem is, don't trust it. Right? There are lies, damned lies, and statistics. What is wrong with this? Well, the first thing that's wrong is there is a completely blurring boundary between manufacturing and service. These things change. Manufacturing companies add services to their products, and service companies add products to their services. And I will show you some examples that has interesting statistical effects out of this. Sorry, let's try to get this right way. That is a company. That company used once upon a time to build engines and to sell them. To some extent, it does that still. But most of what it does today is it rents you power by the hour. It charges for the engines by the hour. That means it offers you a solution. It means it is, in its own view and in other people's view, a service company. Now, of course, one of the fundamental issues around doing that is that the equipment has to work. And if it doesn't work, you end up in big trouble with such a model. So if everybody stops their planes for a few days, you get no revenue. And that's a very big consequence, which was discovered, as you well know, with that little Qantas incident above Singapore. We have, of course, the very more complex issues. That little thing is an autonomous robotic fish, which is there to detect water pollution. It has numerous sensors in it. It has a lot of swarm intelligence. It swims around until it sensors something which is exciting in terms of pollution terms. It calls in its other friends, and it makes a detailed mapping of this scenario and provides the signals to the EPA equivalent around where the pollution issues are and what needs to be done with them. This is sold as a service package. Is that a manufacturing firm? Is it a service firm? It's an interesting question, these things. So we see this whole movement of activities. And this is nothing new. As we go around and look historically, we can see that all industries go through change, by definition. And if I look at this fairly complex picture and try to describe some of the key things it shows, and I'll try to illustrate them. Of course, our needs change. You know, we don't know today what it is we will want to have tomorrow because we don't know what we can have. And we cannot ask for things we do not know that they exist. It's one of the reasons Steve Jobs tend not to do a lot of market research. You know, his view is, you don't know what you want, but I do. And he's a bit arrogant, but he's right reasonably most of the time. So it's one of those things. So, you know, our demands of what we want will change, by definition. The ability to produce and the market structure will change. And the way we focus our products, going from, you know, individual car models to being based on platforms, will change. And as we do that, the way we approach manufacturing will change. So of course it was a craft production once upon a time, and that lives on in some areas. You have people here who do crafts when they manufacture chocolate. It's a craft activity. Manufacture furniture. That still lives, but it's no longer the majority of manufacturing. And it moves in, of course, to mass production issues, which we saw heavily around the 1950s, where it was all about becoming bigger, bigger, bigger. Of course, it was Henry Ford who started that thinking about standardizing scenarios. Then we start to come into mass customization. You can have your car, and it's a car that nobody else in the world has, but every component is made in 10,000 units. So it's mass customization. And then, of course, we have what's happening now, which is globalization, personalization to a much higher extent. And what is it that drives this? Well, let me try to give a brief summary of what kind of 100 years of economic theory has said around these things. Most things start being produced in one or a handful of locations, right? And we get good at it. And as we get good at it, we start to understand how to do this. And then we start to bring in machines and things. So we become capital intensive. And then we start to have specialized labor, which is very good at these things. So that means we become more expensive. And we need volume to offset this expense. So we become focused on volume. Now suddenly we have a capacity for volume. Then we are looking for markets to offset this. So we are looking for more markets. So we start to look at export opportunities, for example. And we start to export to other countries to start to have a demand for our products. And as we do this, suddenly those export markets grow. And it makes sense to establish a local facility there. And that local facility starts to grow into maybe a local customization. That starts to grow into local manufacturing if the cost base is there and good and we have those issues. And if our cost base is here and our export market's cost base is lower, then over time it makes sense to extend the production here for further exports. And at the end of the day, we will re-export to us the things where we started exporting to them because it makes economic sense. And that's this issue about localization. Things move around. The same as industries get born. You know, we didn't have a medical instrument industry 200 years ago, really, in that modern sense. You know? So they get born, they develop, they grow, and then they mature, and then they die. There are very few producers of steam engines around today. There are very few producers of radio tubes around today. They are gone. So we should not be surprised. The sound economies have a constant dynamics here. Things move from place to place, things disappear out, they come in, things die, and things grow. So the sound of a healthy economy is dynamics in these things. And it's driven by things like changing consumer preferences and technological opportunities, which I'll come back to in a second. Now, on the whole, as an economist by the name of Schumpeter told us, new things will kill off old things. And on the whole, our ability to create value and the number of jobs we create on the whole will go up over time. But it will be a wave. So it will go down and then come up, and then go down and then come up on a trend curve that is somewhat sloping upwards. And that, of course, means that at any given point in time, it can be very painful. Mitsubishi closes. That's a painful event. Right, at that point. But it actually is an indicator of a sound economy. It is developing, it's moving. So what we have to do is to ensure that we have a portfolio in our economy of things in different stages. so that we constantly are able to create value and offset these changes over time.